I just got back from a funeral. That was cool. Are you guys ready to talk about economics? Maybe? So, my buddy and I have been talking a bit about how GDP is kind of the wrong metric for measuring economic success, stability, livability in a given country, and yet GDP is the hegemonic attribute that we measure economic success by nation to nation. And I wanted to break down a little bit why this is problematic, how GDP came to be. I'm going to be drawing on this really interesting article from the Scientific American in 2020 that goes into depth on why it is not a good metric for measuring things like sustainability or inequality, and which presidents also kind of favored GDP and favored market deregulation as it grew GDP. But first, if you like the video, leave a like down below. Please comment down below as well if something comes up, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Okay, let's go. Since World War II, most countries around the world have come to use gross domestic product, or GDP, as the core metric for prosperity. The GDP measures market output, the monetary value of all the goods and services produced in an economy during a given period, usually a year. Governments can fail if this number falls, and so, not surprisingly, governments strive to make it climb. But striving to grow GDP is not the same as ensuring the well-being of a society. In truth, GDP measures everything, as Senator Robert Kennedy famously said, except that which makes life worthwhile. The number does not measure health, education, equality of opportunity, the state of the environment, or many other indicators of the quality of life. It does not measure crucial aspects of the economy, such as its sustainability, whether or not it's headed for a crash. What we measure matters, though, because it guides what we do. The article goes on in this section to mention how this is similar to the body count logic of killing as many Vietnamese in the Vietnam War as possible, since that was the best indicator for victory according to the U.S. military. That's what led to a lot of our kind of atrocious behavior in that conflict. Now, a different body count, that from COVID-19, is proving to be a horribly good measure of societal performance. It has little correlation with GDP. The U.S. is the richest country in the world, with a GDP of more than $20 trillion in 2019, a figure that suggests we had a highly efficient economic engine, a racing car that could outperform any other. But the U.S. has recorded more than 600,000 deaths, whereas Vietnam, with a GDP of $262 billion and a mere 4% of U.S. GDP per capita, has had fewer than 500 to date. In the race to save lives, this less prosperous country has beaten us handily. The shallowness of GDP thinking had already become evident in the 2000s. In preceding decades, European economists, seeing the success of the U.S. in increasing GDP, had encouraged their leaders to follow American-style economic policies. But as signs of distress in the U.S. banking system mounted in 2007, France's President Nicolas Sarkozy realized that any politician who single-mindedly sought to push up GDP to the neglect of other indicators of quality of life risked losing the confidence of the public. In January 2008, he asked me, this is Stiglitz talking, the writer, to chair an international commission on the measurement of economic performance and social progress. The panel of experts was to answer the question, how can nations improve their metrics? Measuring that which makes life worthwhile, Sarkozy reasoned, was an essential first step toward enhancing it. GDP has a history that goes all the way back to World War II, where it was originally invented as a metric of measuring the economy. The Department of Commerce charged economist Simon Kuznets of the National Bureau of Economic Research with creating a set of national statistics on income. Kuznets went on to construct the GDP in the 40s as a simple metric that could be calculated from the exceedingly limited market data then available. An aggregate of the dollar value of the goods and services produced in the country, it was equivalent to the sum of everyone's income, wages, profits, rents, and taxes. For this and other work, he received the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences in 1971. However, this is where it gets good. Kuznets repeatedly warned that GDP only measured market activity and should not be mistaken for a metric of social or even economic well-being. The figure included many goods and services that were harmful, including, he believed, armaments, or useless, like financial speculation, and excluded many essential ones that were free, such as caregiving or homemakers. A core difficulty with constructing such an aggregate is that there is no natural unit for adding the value of even apples and oranges, let alone of such disparate things as armaments, financial speculation, and caregiving. Thus, economists use their prices as a proxy for value in the belief that, in a competitive market, prices reflect how much people value apples, oranges, armaments, speculation, or caregiving relative to one another. Again, this metric was constructed in a time in which very little data was available about income and whatnot, so a very simple metric was used. Similar to GDP is GDP per capita. GDP per capita is obtained by dividing the GDP by the population of a country, and increase even if the quality of life of most people in a country worsens. A key indicator of the divergence between GDP and social well-being is inequality. In the US, for instance, the GDP has increased steadily since the 60s, but so has inequality. The 3 richest men in the US already own more wealth than the bottom half of the population combined, and the pandemic is aggravating the disparity. Over time, as economists focused on the intricacies of comparing GDP in different areas and across diverse countries, and constructing complex economic models that predicted and explained changes in GDP, they lost sight of the metric's shaky foundations, those very simple, limited data foundations that GDP was constructed out of. Students seldom studied the assumptions that went into constructing the measure and what these assumptions meant for the reliability of any inferences they made. Instead, the objective of economic analysis became to explain the movements of this artificial entity. GDP became hegemonic across the globe. Good economic policy was taken to be whatever increased GDP the most. The article goes into depth about how during the Reagan era, everything that Reagan and his Congress were interested in doing was generally deregulatory. In 1980, following a period of seemingly poor economic performance, stagflation, marked by slow growth and rising prices, Ronald Reagan assumed office on the promise of ramping up the economy. He deregulated the financial sector, cut taxes for the better off, arguing that the benefits would trickle down to those less fortunate. Although GDP grew somewhat, albeit at a rate markedly lower than in the decades after World War II, inequality rose precipitously. Well aware that the metrics matter, some members of the administration repeatedly argued for stopping the collection of statistics on inequality. If Americans did not know how bad inequality was, presumably, we would not worry about it. The Reagan administration also unleashed unprecedented assaults on the environment, issuing leases for fossil fuel extraction on millions of acres of public land, for example. In 1995, this is Stiglitz talking, joined the Council of Economic Advisors for President Bill Clinton, worrying that our metrics paid too little attention to resource depletion and environmental degradation. We worked with the Department of Commerce to develop a measure of green GDP, which would take such losses into account. When the congressional representatives from the coal states got wind of this, however, they threatened to cut off our funding unless we stopped our work, which we were obliged to. Obviously, in very real terms, just saying, the economy of the United States is bigger than like that of China or France or Brazil, and therefore it's better. That doesn't really hit home. That doesn't really sound right on its face. In detail, if we are looking at things like affordability, wages, stability, social safety nets, they generally lead to a higher factor of well-being that is measured by countries like New Zealand, whereas just legislating based on GDP, eventually, if it's deregulatory like in the United States, leads to an environment in the market that we are enjoying today, where everything is heavily stratified between very, very poor, impoverished class and a very, very rich upper class. That is all the result of deregulatory market practice and market legislation that focuses on making number go up. I wish that we would focus more on metrics of affordability, livability, and sustainability, because obviously, if you can't afford anything, what does it matter if your economy is the biggest in the world by GDP? If you're destroying your environment and that of the world, what does it matter if your economy is the biggest in the world by GDP? All of these things are left out of the conversation around economic legislation to favor the bigger GDP number. And it's the cause of a lot of problems in the current day and age, in which non-economic experts regulate and deregulate based on this one figure, and it's led to catastrophe here in the United States. And that catastrophe has other downstream effects that we are enjoying today. And the rest is basically history until the present. GDP as a hegemonic metric of economic activity has not lost any prevalence. It is still today the prime way we measure the total size of an economy and therefore its total well-being. The two are synonymous, and trickle-down economics, which we have kind of already seen to be provably incorrect as a thesis, are inextricably tied to the idea of GDP as a measure of economic growth, success, and well-being. So long as the economy gets bigger, the wealth will benefit those at the bottom. That is married to the idea of trickle-down economics. So that's all for this one. Short video today. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Again, leave a like down below, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment if something interested you and you'd like to see a video on it. I'll see you in a week. Bye.